I no longer hear the screams. Even when the world slumbers in silence, and I'm left alone with my thoughts, I no longer hear the screams. For years they haunted me, but even nightmares like mine don't last forever. What I did was necessary. Still, I never expected the consequences to stretch this far. It was the year 478 of the Third Age, and autumn weighed heavy in the air. The first mate looked anything but pleased. Blood dripped from his blade, making the deck slick beneath his tasteless choice of shoes.
I warned you, Captain. 100 times I warned you.
His piggish eyes shot a furious glare my way before shifting back to the captain.
It's bad luck bringing womenfolk aboard. The bloody sea rays wouldn't have attacked if she wasn't here. How many men did they slaughter, eh? 8? Garavendra, curse her.
Mind your tongue,
said the captain.
We'll be in port soon enough. If the Ash Elves hear you talk like that about womenfolk, they'll have a blade in your back before you can blink. And let's not forget, we've been attacked before, without this young beauty aboard. Or have you forgotten?
Oh, Captain, I said, brushing a lock of hair behind my ear. It was sweet of him to call me beautiful. Expected, of course, but sweet. The first mate was fuming.
Of course I haven't forgotten.
Good,
the captain replied.
I was beginning to worry the Mind Eater herself had slipped some witch drops into your brew.
I laughed, but the first mate wasn't amused. He glared, sour and humorless.
We'll talk about this later, in private. For now, see to the wounded. The worst off are resting in my quarters.
The first mate gave me one last venomous look and opened his mouth as if to say something, but thought better of it. With a heavy stomp, he turned on his heel and stalked away. I glanced at the captain, but he didn't meet my gaze. Something had shifted in him. His shoulders drooped, his face pale and drawn. His once sharp eyes now looked sunken and dull. They'd used to shine as bright as the sea. Not that such a metaphor meant much anymore, I thought, glancing out over the rail. The water beneath the ship was dark and forbidding. Jagged rocks jutted through the surface, the waves crashing against them, making it seem as though the stones themselves were weeping. Was that why they called it the Sea of Cries? Because even the rocks that rose from this sea inspired thoughts of sorrow. What a terrible name. The Sea of Cries. But then again, the haunted sea back home off Gratzreich wasn't much better. Honestly, whoever came up with these names must have been hopelessly melancholic. I've seen plenty of people like that back in Foxenberg, especially among the lower classes. Long, gloomy faces and dark circles under their eyes. According to Father, they often complained about not being able to afford bread. But seriously, bread? I always preferred cake myself, though I had to be careful. I was engaged, after all. I had to watch what I ate to stay beautiful for Lord Marcus var Orberg, or so Father said. Maybe that's why the poor preferred bread, to keep their figures slim. The thought made me laugh.
What's so funny, my dame?
Asked the captain, but I only laughed harder and took his arm. Come, I said, leading him over to the starboard side of the deck, as far away from the crew as possible without resorting to his quarters. After the sea wraiths attacked at dawn, the most gravely injured had been put there to rest, and the smell was unbearable. The captain and I stood side by side at the rail, looking out over the pitch-black water. A heavy fog blanketed the waves. I wondered what adventures awaited me on the other side. I giggled, hoping the captain would ask what was so amusing again, but he didn't respond this time. I was confused. I didn't know why this sea was called the Sea of Cries, or why the sea back home was called the Haunted Sea, and I didn't really know this ship's captain either. Was he even rich, I wondered. I looked at him. At last he met my gaze, and I held it just long enough to seem thoughtful before glancing away. It didn't matter if I didn't know much. Father always said you didn't need to know much if you were a sweet and lovely girl. And if there was one thing Emilia var Lavenhugel was, it was sweet and lovely.
I apologize for the first mate's behavior, Dame Lavenhugel.
The captain finally said.
He's good at his job, but can be a bit superstitious. True, we've never had women aboard this ship before, but...
Maybe he wouldn't mind women at sea if he could get one into bed, I said, laughing as loudly as I could. But again, the captain didn't react. I hated to admit it, but it bothered me that he wasn't charmed by me anymore. I glanced at him again, and my heart soured. Why didn't he care about me all of a sudden? He hadn't even smiled at me today. I realized he'd barely looked at me at all. What was going on? Did I mean nothing to him anymore? I snorted.
What's wrong?
He asked. Could he not even understand that? By the heavens, if he was going to act like this, he could go straight beyond the veil. No man in the world was worth this kind of effort. There was always another one waiting just around the corner. Forget it, I said, looking away. A silence fell over us. Aside from the rhythmic slap of the waves against the hull and the creaking of the ropes in the masts, the only sound were the tired, murmuring voices by the crew. By the gods, what a miserable bunch.
Look there, my dame,
the captain said after a while, pointing south over the rail. I could finally see our destination through the fog hanging over the waves. Ever since I was little, I dreamt of seeing the fabled Lók-Lalesh. Other girls at court had longed for the sunny southern provinces of the empire, the white beaches of Tash Halabar and Zerania. But not me. No, I was always drawn to the grey and eerie Ashland. Father often told stories from the war about how the ash elves ate moss and worms instead of proper food, fought with poison-tipped spears instead of muskets or cannons, and even flung carnivorous larvae at their enemies. In winter, they bathed in rotting swamps to stay warm. Oh, how thrilling! Not even the tales from the sea-swallowed lands of Bohemia were this disgusting. For as long as I could remember, I'd begged Father to let me travel to the colony where the ash elves lived. Not until you're 18, young lady, he always said. Oh, how I hated him for it. I just wanted to see the same wondrous things he had. Besides, he hadn't had to wait until he was 18. Grandfather had knighted him and let him sail with the Imperial Armada at 17. Furthermore, he'd said, your first duty is to marry. Imagine what Lord Marcus would say if I let his fiancée travel to the Empire's outermost reaches like that. Oh, how I'd cried. I'm sure I even hit him. Never had I been so angry with him. Well, maybe I had. But one thing I knew. I had never loved him more than when my chambermaid woke me up on my name day to say he had changed his mind. I could leave in October, 2 months before even turning 16. Oh, Father! Thank you, thank you, thank you! I'd shrieked, throwing myself into his arms when we met in the banquet hall late that evening. But what about poor Lord Marcus? Won't he be utterly heartbroken now that his fiancée is on an adventure? First and foremost, you're my daughter, Emilia, he'd replied. The memory was so sweet that I almost forgot how annoyed I was with the captain. I squinted through the black sea fog, trying to glimpse the shore. The rigging creaked overhead as the sails strained against the weak wind, while the flags fluttered in the salty air.
Do you see it?
the captain asked, pointing towards the shore. Yes, I murmured, remembering I was angry. Some green lights in the fog.
That's not fog, my dame. It's ash.
Don't be ridiculous, Captain. Of course it's fog.
No fog is that dark.
And what do you know about it? I scoffed. Father says the elves brew soup black as tar. That they don't have horses, but ride astride some kind of colossal insects. Deep in the Ashland, sorcerers don't live in towers, but inside giant mushrooms built in ancient times by Demora worshipping crowmen. Who knows? Maybe they have black fog too.
With all due respect, my dame, this isn't my first time sailing to Lók-Lalesh. We don't call it the Ashland just because the inhabitants have grey skin. Everything in this country is buried in ash. The land, the forests, the cities, even the air is thick with it. For generations, the elves have grown their food in the grey. In some places, they even build their houses out of coal. The children they bear are born in ash. They live and die in ash. When they die...
They're buried in ash, yes. Father's told me all this before.
So why do you insist that...
The captain began, but cut himself off when I shot him a sharp look. People tended to stop talking when I looked at them like that. I'd practiced the expression in the mirror. My emerald eyes could sting like a snake. You were saying?
Nothing. My apologies, my dame. Of course you know these things as well as I do.
I studied the captain in silence.
Please, my dame, promise me you'll be careful while here. This is a strange land you've chosen to visit, and your bodyguard was badly injured during the Wraith attack this morning.
I rolled my eyes. Of course, Werner had been badly injured. Every night since we'd set sail from Foxenberg, I'd been slipping a sedative into his wine so he wouldn't notice when I snuck off to the captain's quarters. How was a poor young noblewoman supposed to enjoy herself with a watchdog always trailing behind her? He'll survive, I said, noticing one of my nails needed filing.
But if the worst should happen to you, he won't be able to protect you.
And what exactly would the worst be, Captain?
Many things hide in the ash, my dame. Some say this land is haunted, that the spirits of the ancient world still wander the swamps when night falls. Pagan gods, long abandoned by the civilized world, are said to still dwell in the depths of Lók-Lalesh.
I glanced over my shoulder at the crew on deck. Many of them looked scared. Sure enough, the thicker the ash, fog, gathered around the ship, the paler the sailors' faces became. I turned back to the captain. Are you worried about me, Captain? At first he didn't answer, just stood there staring at the shore creeping closer. Gods, how boring he'd become.
I'd rather nothing bad happen to you, my dame,
he finally said. A dreadful thought crossed my mind. What if Captain Boring took it upon himself to act as my bodyguard now that Werner was out of commission? That would make it impossible to have any fun in Lók-Lalesh. I thought for a moment. Then, the solution came to me. Hidden in the vial I kept tucked in my corset was the same sedative I'd used on Werner. If just one drop was enough to knock out big, strong Werner, imagine what 2 or 3 could do to the captain. I turned and took his arm. He flinched, but didn't pull away. I smiled, then leaned in and whispered in his ear. What do you say, Captain? Do we have time for one last round in your quarters before we dock? He flinched, glancing towards the crew. They were busy with their work. He looked back at me, his eyes filled with unease.
But the wounded are in there. We can't just...
They can find somewhere else to die, I nearly said, but then remembered the awful stench. Blood, gore, and worse. The sailors bitten by the sea wraiths had flesh wounds that were already starting to rot. Even if they moved elsewhere, it would take hours for the smell to clear out of the quarters. When I had gone to retrieve my jewelry earlier, I had nearly vomited. The thought made me push the captain away. "That's right," I said. "Time for plan B." I straightened up and locked eyes with the captain. "Do you love me?" He went pale. I stared at him, unblinking. He looked terrified. I wanted to laugh, but I held it in, keeping my expression stern, unyielding, penetrating. "Why don't you answer me, Captain? You're not afraid of Lord Marcus or my father, are you?" His eyes darted nervously. That amused me. "If I were you, I'd be more afraid of what happens if you don't tell the daughter of Margrave Reuben var Lavenhugel that you love her. Especially after sleeping with her every single night at sea, from Gratzreich to Lók-Lalesh." He was sweating under his uniform now, no doubt about it. He was not the sharpest tool, but he was smart enough to recognize a threat when he heard one. I let him squirm as long as I wanted, before finally breaking into laughter. He smiled, nervously, sure, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that I meant something to him again, even if that something was a threat. "Promise me you will stay in port, Captain. You will remain here obediently and sail me back once my visit to the Ashland is over. When that is up to me. Understood?" He nodded. "And you won't stand in my way when I set out to explore the colony alone?" He shook his head. Perfect. I had him wrapped around my finger. I turned, satisfied, and squinted into the fog, where the sprawling harbour city of Blotseth slowly emerged from the darkness. Truly, I thought to myself, and flashed a smile. The world would have to end before anyone could rein in a girl as sweet and lovely as Emilia var Lavenhugel.